everybody, and welcome to the Millcreek Government Channel. I'm Phil Fatica. Nice to be with you. Thank you for joining us. I love when Tom New comes and joins us because the two of us can talk for about 9 days and not even take a breath. But I love what he brings with him, and that is, who are the newest inductees into the Erie Hall of Fame? Tom, always a pleasure to have you here.
Now, this is real history, Phil.
Yes,
you know, when
is.
I finally enter retirement, I'm going to write the Tom New version of the history of Erie, and it's going to be great.
Well, you know, Tom's so much associated with WQLN. You see him so much, and a good friend. And a lot of people driving force behind recognizing people who have done incredibly wonderful things in many different areas, and some of whom I have not heard of. And so I love when you come in and tell me all about them.
Yeah, and you know what? And these are, a lot of these folks that are in the Hall of Fame, we're up to 20 class members right now, you know, I haven't heard of. And so what's great is when folks that learn about the Hall of Fame, if they know a story, you know, we are way short on any of the folks who represented us from our Native Americans here. Very short on women, and we're only represented by one African American.
So you're asking people, say, you know, it's real easy to find out what you have to do to get people nominated. We'll be talking about that throughout the show. But let's start with a family I bet everybody knows. When I was in high school, we used to go out and sneak into the pool on the campus behind the administration building, and we thought, how daring, nobody ever thought about doing that. Yeah, everybody was doing it. So who's the family we're talking about here?
Well, the family is the Barron family, and when the Barron family was listed, or when the essay was written, the question was, the folks on the Hall of Fame board have always thought that the Reed family is Erie's first family. You know, the Barron family, they were just the same. It was a big family contributions, and it just was complicated what to call the second first family. So we're still working on that. If anybody knows, I'd love to hear. But the Barron's family story, it began in Germany when Morris Barron bought a forge hammer mill, and he started to make paper there. In fact, he got the name of his company from this old mill that he bought, this hammer mill, and he made hammer mill paper. He built a very prosperous company, but he always thought that if he was really going to make it big time, he would have to cross the ocean, come to America. So his two sons, Ernst and Otto, lived that dream, and they came to the United States. Their immigrant story is different from our own ancestors because they came in style. But they came to the shores of Lake Erie. It was perfect for transportation, easy access to wood and things like that, and they built an empire. And really, hammer mill paper is known worldwide. Oh,
and because we're doing this in the Millcreek Township building, they were the people who gave the land for the Asbury Woods complex.
Well, yeah, and I'm glad you said that, because really, as good as hammer mill was, and that was their global contribution, I think that the legacy of the Barron family, Asbury Woods, it's an amazing complex, right?
But a laboratory.
Go across town just a little bit right now. The future of this country is being written at Penn State Erie. We have large technology companies that are in from West Coast, especially California, that are here, and they're using the land grant system of Penn State to create products there. And Penn State, Mary Barron, the wife of Ernst, who donated their Glenwood farmhouse, you know, is responsible for that.
And I think Barron, about a couple months ago now, maybe, got a nice honor. They were like the second ranked auxiliary campus in the country.
Penn State is moving all of their engineering right here to Erie, Pennsylvania. It'll happen at the Barron campus. Now, there's something that I'd like to throw out before we move to the next candidate, because I mean, we all work for a living and we all have great benefits, right? The other thing that the Barrons did, and I just want to make sure, is that they, and this is back in the 20s, the late teens and the 20s, they gave hourly bonuses for workers who did well. They also had paid vacations, and they supported their employees that were forced to go home for some sort of a medical thing. They provided health care. And this was back at a time that it was really unheard of. And, you know, for that reason alone, I think that the Barrons were probably a bit ahead of their time.
And the campus, if you've never visited the campus, just take a ride up and walk around, drive around. It's huge. It's expanded.
It's a great piece of property.
It's beautiful.
Great piece of property.
Now, the next person on the list, because I want to make sure we get to all fine. Yeah, this is a person that you would know if you watched the Turner Classic Movies, or if you're a movie buff like Tom and I, because his real name is Merwin Bogue, but when he made the movies, he was called
Ishka Bible.
Yep.
Ishka Bible. And really, you know, his story is a very short, simple one. He went to East High. He was graduated from high school. He went to West Virginia. He was in a pre-law degree. This is back at the time that the big bands were big. He got part-time jobs playing the cornet. He was a great musician.
Played with Kay Kaiser.
Kay Kaiser. He followed these bands out to California, joined up with Kay Kaiser. That started a bit of a burlesque career, but it also got into radio and eventually television when he left to pursue other business interests. So that in and of itself, because of his scene in the movies and things like that, would have been big. But he gave the world some iconic images.
Sure did.
Mo Howard of the Three Stooges got his haircut from Ishka Bible.
Can't help but think maybe the Beatles too.
Well, maybe the Beatles too. But a lot of the comedy of Alan Arkin, of Beatrice Arthur, of many of the people that the TV stars that we loved in the 60s and 70s drew their comedic style from Ishka Bible. And even a popular actor today, I was about to say Drew Carey, but the other Carey who was in Dumb and Dumber, he was in Jim Carrey. That's it. Credits. Ishka Bible is the guy who formulated his comedic style.
And I'll bet you a lot of people out there, because when he was a star in the 30s and the 40s, I had an aunt, I believe, I remember her mentioning his name at East High School when she went to school. Now, she's passed away many years ago, but the name, of course, Merwin Bogue, Ishka Bible. So we have the Barron family, we have Ishka Bible.
Yeah.
The third individual, I do not know, and I'm dying to know who she is and why.
Well, so the third person is Ruth Newton. And Ruth Newton was raised down around the 9th and Walnut neighborhoods, you know, so a very nice neighborhood, things like that. But she was an illustrator. She went to the Pennsylvania Academy, as you know, Plaskon or George Erickson did from this area. And her style was to draw very bright colored cartoons. She entered a contest. She won the contest for doing some artwork for Campbell's Soup. She did not do the kids, but she did. She won this contest, and her illustrations got her a publishing career. And if you were a kid in the 1930s and 40s, I guarantee that you had 3 or 4 or 5 of her books in your home anywhere in this country.
So you want to go home and look at those old books and Ruth Eleanor Newton, N-E-W-T-O-N.
And if you have those books, they have value today. You know, she brought to life such characters as Little Miss Muffet, Peter Rabbit, all of those, a lot of the Grimm's fairy tales, And then she also had a line of dolls. Now here's what I think is most fascinating about Ruth Newton. So she has this great career as an illustrator. She stops because she wanted to move into making dolls, and she had a very successful line of dolls. But she decided, you know, I want to get back to nature, landscapes. I want to be a painter again. I don't want to do this cartoon thing. So her family had bought a bit of an estate, a little farm in Harbor Creek. She moved back to Harbor Creek, and she lived there until about the mid-70s, when she went to Rondell Nursing Home, and then she finally passed away. John Vanko from the Erie Art Museum became aware of her because there was some artwork that he was able to purchase for the art museum, and they do have a large collection of her work. He never knew that she was back in town. In all those years that he was at the art museum, that she was living in this area, that he was buying this collection, he never knew, and it was just by happenstance that he saw an obituary. So I don't know.
So she died here.
Oh yeah, right here in Erie.
Okay, well that's 3. Again, we have the Barron family, Ishka Bible, and Ruth Eleanor Newton. Now, before we move on to the other 2.
Yeah, you can talk about this guy more than I can.
Well, no, not really. I don't think no. But before we move on to those, people want to know, how do I nominate somebody? What is it that you're looking for, the committee? What are you looking for? We have a lot of notes here about how you
the main thing is
evaluate this.
Yeah, whoever you're thinking of, they must have a global contribution.
Okay.
Now, that is like beauty. It's in the eyes of the observer. You know, some of our candidates, Lord, he made products that are in every single car on the planet, right? You totally get the global contribution there. But then if you have a teacher that was nominated, you know, you think, well, yeah, so what's the contribution?
What's the big,
well,
what's the link there?
If that teacher is teaching students that go out and do big things, there's the link for the global contribution. I think that if somebody has got, you know, they're accomplished enough, you'll be able to make that connection for the global contribution.
So you're looking for, they have to be deceased.
They have no longer alive.
And is there a time limit, 5 years, 10 years?
No.
Okay. And you have to be able to justify in a couple hundred words, is it? Or at least present.
That's all I need is a couple of hundred words.
Now, how do they go, where do they go to find this? Do you have a website?
Well, you can get in touch with me right at WQLN. That's very easy to do. The other thing is, you can go online to eriehalloffame.com.
eriehalloffame.com.
There is a form on there.
Can you visit the kiosks at the Plaskon Library?
And we have a couple of kiosks.
Or at the International Airport if you're flying out sometime. Yeah.
And there's information there. So you can go online, you can contact WQLN.
Yes.
You can check out the information at the kiosks.
Okay. Now, part of a tease as to what our next person is, you had these links that, and I know the next gentleman because I'm positive he was teaching high school when I was in high school. He got you
to draw stick figures, didn't he?
Yeah, I'm not too good at that either. But this next gentleman is?
Well, it's Joe Plaskon. And Joe Plaskon is a teacher from the Erie School District, or a teacher who taught for the Erie School District.
Right.
And what's interesting about Joe Plaskon is he was a student of George Erickson, who was the Saturday Evening Post cover artist. He painted under the name of Eugene Ivard. And so he was a great artist, and he died way too young. And he was able to share some of that with Joe Plaskon. Joe Plaskon was a teacher that believed that if you wanted to be an artist, you had to work all the time. And that was something that he got across in every single one of his classes. He always had a painting on the easel. He was always painting. And he also told his students that if you want to paint well, you really got to observe the world around you. And it's not just by saying, oh, there's a yellow chair that, you know, I'll use yellow paint to do that. No, the question that Joe would ask his students is, what makes that chair a yellow chair? Or a better question posed is, if a green and brown tree are casting a shadow, what color is that shadow? So he made the use of color very, very complicated. And from him, Richard, and I always struggle with Richard's last name, so I'm going to look down if that's okay.
Sure.
Anakevich, when he finally, he was one of Joe's students, when he went to New York City in the late 50s, he began the pop art movement. The pop art movement began from the promise that you can tell better stories through the use of color than you can through an entire composition.
So, and that traces back to Plaskon.
And that traces right back to Plaskon.
Yeah.
If you see any of Richard's paintings, you'll see these bright colored fluorescent squares and shapes and things like that. And you wonder how you get to there from Joe's work. But Joe learned something from Richard, and that was the use of acrylic paint that dries quickly, has brighter colors. So you're not mixing it and making it like with the oil paints. So he then began to tell this color story through paintings that he would do all around town. Neighborhoods, instead of being these nice earth tones and things like that, they were an explosion of bright fluorescent colors.
Now, you're an artist. What medium do you like to work in? What's your most successful medium?
I like the coloring book with the wax.
No.
I mean, I like to goof around. No. I flare pens.
Anything with electronic, I mean, so much graphics being done on the computers.
I wish.
Now.
I'm just, it's just all like scribbling with pen and stuff like that.
Yeah. You're being modest.
I need to say one last thing about Joe.
Yeah.
For anybody that wants to understand what this crazy language is all about, go to the Art Museum, second floor, the new section. John Vanko has an amazing setup for Joe Plaskon. By just looking at the 18 to 20 paintings that he has hanging here, you totally get how an artist uses color to tell a story. In other words, the warmer colors are way out front. The greens and the blues, those cool tones, are way in the back. And you also can see how you can go from being what you might call a realistic artist to more of an abstract painter. You know, it's very interesting. They do a great job there at the Art Museum.
With so many cutbacks taking place in education today, I'm wondering whether our artists of that cut, are they being encouraged in schools? I mean, there's I don't know if that's happening anymore.
That's $1 million question. Are the arts being encouraged? Can you make a living in the arts,
Can you make
too?
a living, right?
Yeah.
Well, we got the Barron family, Ishka Bible, whose real name was Merwin Bogue.
Oh, and by the way, Mad Magazine, do you remember their motto? What Alfred E. Newman would say?
What me worry?
Yeah, they got that from Ishka Bible.
Did they really?
Yeah, just threw that out there.
Ruth Newton, Joseph Plaskon, and we're down to the last one, the fifth one. And again, this is an individual I do not know. So I love when you're telling me how the contribution he made.
And this guy is totally built into our DNA. I mean, if you know Charles Reed, who was the congressman from this area, or William Scott, we talked about him. He was the coal king, the railroad king. John Tracy is another one of those people. He was never married. He got a job in the railroad. So he worked for the Erie Pittsburgh Railroad. He was an engineer for that group. He eventually came back into this area where he was the Erie Northeast head of that railroad group. At that time, and we're talking about the mid-19th century, so the mid-1800s, around 1850, there was a lot of confusion in railroads because the tracks were different sizes.
The gauge.
And that's exactly it. And the width of the track was the gauge. We had a scam going in Erie that you couldn't beat. We invented the scam in this town. And the way that the scam worked
the precursor to the Ponzi scheme.
Yes. Oh, it's beautiful. It was beautiful. I would love that we had these same people running town today. But anyway, the way that it worked is you put some shipment on a car in New York City, you send it to Erie over the lakeshore line through Buffalo. Train stops in Erie and out by Harbor Creek. Everything is unloaded and it's put on an Erie train. It's sent across town again, loaded up again because the gauge was different. So what that meant is that the train and the cargo would slow down here for a couple of days. People would spend money in town, and it was great. Tracy was from this town. He understood how we prospered with this practice, but at the same time, he knew that it wouldn't work. You know, just as like you and I have struggled with 8-tracks and cassettes and CDs, you really need one format. So he was the one that put a standard gauge through Erie.
Okay.
He did this to understand how radical this was. City council and the mayor and the citizens rioted and burned down the tracks. It really took quite a few years. You know, so that was a big deal. But he stayed with the road, and he built the railroads westward. Tracy built the first bridge across the Mississippi River. And for anybody that thinks that that's a small achievement, they've got to think about bridges at that time. They were falling down left and right. He built a solid structure, and that guaranteed the traffic could continue all the way out to the
Do you know where on the Mississippi he did that?
Oh, yeah. It was just north of St. Louis.
Okay.
He built that, yeah.
So John Tracy ended the gauge wars in our area, and then his career extended into bridge building.
And then, so there's also a sad part of this story. I mean, there's always, you know, this like great, tremendous stuff. You know, so he was a single guy. He knew all these. He was very close friends with all of these folks back in Erie. He didn't live long. He was sick, and when he was 51, he came back to Erie, and he died in William Scott's home. And people, Scott lived just a little bit north of where the Erie Club is. There used to be the Scott Mansion there on Peach Street. And so, you know, here's a guy who had this very successful career, but at 51, at that time he was only in the second act. He still had a third and fourth act to follow.
Well, this is fascinating to hear the people that get nominated, and then you have to go through the process. You got to defend your nomination, you know, and you got to really stand up and fight for them to be accepted. And you're looking for More nominations?
We are always looking for nominations. When I speak to different groups, see, you know, with all the other chores and things that you have to do at WQLN, it's hard to focus a lot of time on research and finding these things. That said, the Erie Hall of Fame won't work unless the Erie Hall of Fame receives work from people here in town.
Our viewers.
Yeah. So,
everywhere.
you know, it's the Erie Hall of Fame does not belong to WQLN. It belongs to Erie, and it's really a great resource. You know, if you want to learn about your community, just looking at some of the films that we have posted on the Hall of Fame site. But sure,
incredible.
You know,
incredible.
I encourage everybody to visit the library, you know, to think about the stories that you've heard throughout your life, and we've all heard those stories, you know, and then investigate them, and you know, let me know about them.
Right. Not too long ago, just the other day, in fact, in the newspaper, they were celebrating Frank Jarecki's flight out of Poland.
Yeah.
And now, obviously, he's not from Erie, but he settled in Erie, you know. And when he did that in the 50s with that Russian MiG out of Poland, I mean, that was worldwide news, you know. Now, would that be a story that you'd be considering?
It's absolutely a story, and what's interesting about
his widow, I know Sandy.
What's interesting about that MiG that we got and the intelligence that we got from that, an Erie guy, also a Hall of Fame member, John Boyd, used a lot of that when he was creating, when he was rewriting how you go into battle. And things like that. Yeah. You know, because what he couldn't understand is that the MiG was such a good airplane, and we're beating this thing with these crummy little, but he discovered what the reason was. You know, we could move faster and we had better vision. On our planes. But yeah, I think that Jarecki is a great person to go into the Hall of Fame, especially when you think about he made his life here.
Oh, absolutely, and his business still survives. His family is still in the area, so I know them, and hello to them. And there's so many people that have come, well, I shouldn't say it's so many people, there's so many great names that have come before these people. You might recognize Hurry Burley, Paul Sipple, Strong, Vincent, Daniel Dobbins, Philip Cochran, Terry and the Pirates, Bishop John Mark Gannon, so relevant as we're taping now. The new Pope is going to be coming on board here shortly. But again, we in the closing minutes here, we want to say that the latest group, and let's run them down. You can give a little thumbnail sketch.
Sure.
The Barron family, because of Penn State Barron and in Millcreek Township,
their legacy.
Woods Complex.
Yeah, they did a lot to reinvent the workplace and things like that. The Barron family, you know, they had some tragedies with their own children. There aren't any offsprings, so you have to look at them as their legacy of what they did for Penn State Erie. Okay.
Ishka Bible, real name?
Merwin Bogue, a Bay Rat.
East High School graduate.
Yeah, and he went on to be a radio star, a film star, and a television star.
Next time you're watching Turner Classic Movies and anything with Kay Kaiser pops up, look for him. He played the cornet, and he had the bowl-shaped haircut. Yeah. Ruth Newton.
Yeah, if you've ever read a kid's book, and if you have any old children's books, really look to see if you've got a Ruth Newton. They're bringing in some money on eBay. But she was the one who brought to life Peter Rabbit, Miss Muffet, who sat on the tuffet eating her
curds and whey.
There you go. You know literature.
Joseph Plaskon.
Yeah, you know, Plaskon, the question with Plaskon is an old one. You know, who is better, the teacher or the student? You know, Plaskon experimented with color. He knew how color could tell a story, but it was his student who created the pop art movement. Yeah.
And last but not least, John, Tracy.
I talked to the new executive director over at the Erie Historical Society, and he believes that Tracy may be the most significant person from the Erie area for what he did with transportation and opening up the West.
Ending the gauge wars.
And ending the gauge wars.
And if you've ever crossed the Mississippi, you know that it's not Walnut Creek. You know, it's a little wider.
No, it's more like Elk Creek.
Tom, thanks so much for doing this. This is the Erie Hall of Fame. And Tom New, of course, you can contact him very easily at WQLN. Thanks again for your knowledge, your friendship. And please find somebody that you'd like to nominate, because they
tell me about them.
They'd love to tell you. Thanks again for joining us. I'm Phil Fatika. Until next time, take care, everybody.